right, then you have to assume that there is a living, almighty, sovereign, true, holy God. If you assume that there's a God like that, then you have to assume that everything he says in the Bible about your behavior and the way you live and about the plan of salvation is true. And then if you assume that is true, you need to surrender your life to Jesus and you need to obey him instead of doing what you feel like doing. Now, let's run that reel backwards. If you don't want to surrender to God and obey the way he tells you to live, then you cannot assume that there's a holy living God. Therefore, the Bible cannot be telling the truth. Therefore, you must discredit the Bible at every turn so you can live the way you feel like it. Do we understand? All right. A lot of this assumption the Bible is wrong has nothing to do with theology. It really has nothing to do with archaeology. It has everything to do with how you want to live. And if you don't want to live the way the Bible says, you cannot assume it's true. You with me? And you'll look for any excuse to discredit the Bible. Even if there's no excuse, you still won't believe it because of the implications for your life. Capiche? Yep. Capiche? Okay, good. No, back to our story. So John Trevor looks at this scroll, 1947 in Jerusalem. Let me just say, if y'all get bored with this, just walk away, and if enough of you walk away, I'll stop. Okay? But I spent a year at Hopkins doing a course in the Dead Sea Scrolls, a year. And I never get to use this anywhere. I mean, in church. Nobody's interested in church listening to a half-hour lecture on the Dead Sea Scrolls, but you're here. So hopefully you're interested. Okay. All right. So anyway, he took it to John Trevor. Trevor called America. He called William F. Albright, who was in class at the time. In seminar class, the same class where the guy said to me, "You will never get a degree from this place," with the students around the table. Yeah, it was a Wednesday afternoon. And he called, they knew each other, he called Albright out of class, and he told him what he had in front of him. And Dr. Albright went back into class and called a friend named Sam, a student named Sam Ivry, I-W-R-Y. He was my professor for a year in the Dead Sea Scrolls, Sam Ivry. But he was still a graduate student then. But he loves to tell this story. We heard this story once a week. You know? He's an old Jewish guy who loved to tell this story. So he said, Sam, come here. So Sam leaves class. This really happened. And they go down to Dr. Albright's office where he has a big old chalkboard. You know, this is 1947. And he gives him a piece of chalk and he said, Sam, write this down as I dictate it to you. And so John Trevor, here in Jerusalem, began reading the scroll to William F. Albright over the telephone, one letter at a time. And Albright would tell Ivry what to write on the board. And so after about 3 verses, Dr. Albright was so smart. He was fluent in 7 languages. The guy was unbelievable. After about 3 verses, with all of this now up on the blackboard, the green board, he said to Sam Ivry, he said, Sam, this scroll comes from before the time of Christ. He was able to tell that. You say, how? Well, from the orthography, the way the letters were shaped, and from the syntax, the way the grammar went, and from the way, just trust me, he was able to tell that. And he said to John Trevor, he said, John, do you actually have that scroll in your possession? And John said, yeah, I have it sitting right here in front of me. He said, get that scroll. I don't care what you have to do, get that scroll. Well, John got off the phone and said to Mr. Kando, this Arab antiquities dealer, how much you want for this?
$1.99.
Bad mistake.
$1.
Bad mistake. He should have gotten off the phone, rolled it back up, handed it to him, said, it's a piece of junk. Get out of my office. And then he might have had a chance to actually buy it. But as soon as you say to an Arab, you've dealt with these guys, $1, $1, $1, $1. And as soon as he said to an Arab that this is worth something, oh, baby, everything changed. Kando rolled it back up and said it's not for sale, and took it and left. But before he left, John Trevor said, well, look, if I can't buy it, would you at least allow me to photograph each section of, well, they weren't really pages, they were section of parchment sewn together. It was a scroll, and each section of parchment had, he said, can I photograph it? Well, Kando agreed to that, and you can actually buy today those original photographs in a book. They have a bright red background like your shirt, brother, and they have this, it's beautiful, absolutely beautiful, these photographs he took. So, here's what we have in 1947. We have Mr. Kando with 5 of these scrolls that he won't sell. We've got Albright saying somewhere is maybe the greatest archaeological discovery in the world, certainly of the 20th century. And we've got John Trevor trying to figure out how to buy it as 1947 comes to an end. You with me? Mm-hmm. Now, 1948 comes, the Jewish independence comes, there's war between Jordan and Lebanon and Syria and Egypt and Iraq and Israel, and Bethlehem is no longer a friendly place for Israelis. And that openness where they could go back and forth is shut down. So here Mr. Kando is in Bethlehem with these scrolls, but he can't go into Israel anymore to try to sell them. So he took them to Damascus. Is this, y'all finding this interesting?
Yes.
In 1949, he took them to Damascus and gave them to the bishop of the Syrian Orthodox Church. And he brought them to America in 1949 and advertised them for sale in the Wall Street Journal. I sent you a copy of the ad. So I'm telling you the truth, because the people before would say that's not true. I sent you a copy of the ad from the Wall Street Journal, right? And he put them in. Ancient scrolls known as the Dead Sea Scrolls for sale. Call 212 blah blah blah. Seriously, I'm not lying to you. And the Jews, particularly a fellow named E.L. Sukenik, very famous archaeologist at the time, were trying to track where in the world these scrolls went. And they spotted them in the Wall Street Journal. Someone called and told Dr. Sukenik about this. Well, he knew that they would never sell these scrolls to the Israelis. I mean, this is 1949. The feeling between the Arab countries and Israel was like super duper bad. So he knew they'll never sell them to us if they know who we are. So he recruited a guy from Cincinnati named Harry Orlinsky. Harry Orlinsky was a professor at the Hebrew Union College there in Cincinnati. And I had the wonderful privilege of meeting Dr. Orlinsky. I had to pick him up from the BWI airport. He came to speak to us at Hopkins one year. And I had the privilege of picking him up because I would drive up from D.C. So they said, can you stop and pick him up? And I asked him, is this story really true? You know, the one I'm about to tell you? And he said, totally true. Okay, so Dr. Orlinsky agreed to go be the go-between to try to buy these scrolls. Now, Dr. Orlinsky was given a pseudonym, Mr. Green. Now, you could look at Mr. Green and tell, you know what I'm saying? But anyway, Mr. Green made contact with the guy who had put the article in the paper, and long story short, ended up buying all 5 scrolls for $250,000. Now that's a lot of money, but that is unbelievable that they were able to get these 5 scrolls for $250,000. And so the Israelis took the scrolls and brought them here to Jerusalem. They're actually right here. They're kept, in climate-controlled condition, because these scrolls for 2,000 years were down in the desert where there's virtually zero humidity and zero temperature change. And now, if you put them out in the normal atmosphere, these scrolls are